And to proceed, let us now listen to the welcome address of the Charter President of Innerfield Club Taguig District 383, and here she is, Miss Jocelyn M. Alpay.
Good evening to everyone. Welcome to this webinar on human rights. I believe that all of us will benefit from this activity to discover how much aware are we of our rights. Tonight, all of us will be gaining additional learnings from our invited guest speakers. I would like to share this quotation on human rights for each of us to ponder as we listen to the topics to be discussed by our distinguished speakers. The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Once again, my warm welcome to the participants. Thank you.
And to introduce the key speaker for tonight, may we have Ms. Rosalie Pinion, our club secretary.
Good evening, everyone. Our first speaker is a registered psychometrician, cum laude graduate in BS Industrial Organizational Psychology at Adventist University of the Philippines, and candidate for graduation in MA Psychology. Studying and learning must be his hobby. He is now holding a position of Administrative Officer 4, Unit Head for Protection Unit, NCR Anti-Trafficking Task Force, Interagency Council Against Trafficking and Department of Justice here in Manila. They are focused on victims of human trafficking and work closely with prosecutors handling traffic cases. Part of their mission is to assure the safety and well-being of any victims through the police and other relevant service providers. It is with my pride and honor to introduce our next speaker in our Human Rights webinar, Mr. Jaire Reynor Vito.
Persons Act of 2003. It's RA 9208 and amended last 2006, I think. It's the expanded Anti-Trafficking Persons Act, or the 10364. So basically, this law was originated during 2003 and amended last 2013, which gives us policies in eliminating trafficking in persons, especially for women and children. Also establishes necessary mechanisms to protect and support trafficked persons and provides penalties for the violators. So basically, as we can see, trafficking in persons defined as recruitment, transportation, transfer, obtain, hire, provide, offer, maintain, harbor, or recipient of persons without victim's consent or knowledge within or across national borders. For the means, it's the use of threat or force or other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, or position, taking advantage of the vulnerability of the person, or giving or receiving payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over person for purpose of exploitation. Then later on, we will be discussing what are the types of human trafficking. So basically, according to the law, there are three elements of human trafficking. This is the act, the mean, and the purpose. So for the acts, this would be what do human traffickers do for the victim witnesses. Then for the means, how do they do it? And then for the purpose, why do they do it? So basically, I'll be elaborating on the elements of human trafficking pertaining to the acts. Ano po ba yung mga sample ng acts? So this would be the recruitment, transfer, transportation, harboring, receipt of persons, providing, and offering. Then for the means, this could be abduction or force, threat, and other forms of coercion. This could also be fraud, deception of abuse of power, taking advantage of vulnerability, giving or receiving of payment. Then for the purpose, these are the types of human trafficking na po. Wherein I'll be discussing later on the detail of it. First is the prostitution, other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor of services, slavery, servitude, removal of organs. Then, according to the law on RA 9208 in Section 3A, it states that further provides that the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of a child for the purpose of exploitation shall also be considered as trafficking in persons, even it does not involve of any means or set forth. So basically, ito lang po yung difference. Wait lang po, I'll admit lang someone po from the meeting. Okay. So
Ah,
according to the law,
excuse me for a while.
yes
Baka
po.
merong electric fan na naka-open kasi hindi maingay siya. Ang ingay kanina pa.
Opo nga, parang sino po kaya yun?
Baka merong electric fan na open, please turn it off.
Hindi
Ayan,
po,
okay.
paki-mute na lang po yung mga hindi nagsasalita except for Sir Jaire po.
Thank you po. So for the minor victims of human trafficking, means is exempted na po, unlike for the adult one. So basically, acts and purpose lang po yung tinitingnan na element for the law and for the prosecution of the case. So basically, for the acts, we already talked about it, kung ano po yun, such as recruitment, transfer, transportation, harboring, receipt of the person, providing offers, and others. And then for the purpose, it could be the prostitution, other sexual forms or exploitation, labor or forced labor, slavery, servitude, or removal of organs. Wait, parang nawala po sa akin. Ayun. So, we'll be dealing on the question, sino nga po ba ang bata or who is the child? According to the law, child are any person under 18 years old and there's some other scope for a child. According to the law, child can be also the one who is over 18, however, but unable to fully take care or of protect him or herself from the abuse, neglect, cruelty, exploitation, or discrimination because of physical or mental disability or condition. So basically, hindi lamang po yung mga batang below 18, but yung meron pong disability sa kanilang pag-iisip or sa kanilang sarili na hindi po nila kayang protektahan ang kanilang sarili, sila rin po ay tinatawag na child or bata. So what is child trafficking? Basically, according to the law, as I was saying a while ago, acts lang po and yung purpose yung tinitingnan within the court for us to see kung yung isang victim po ay magiging qualified trafficking. As well as according to the law din po and sa mga cases po namin na na-handle, mas mataas po ang penalty kapag bata at hindi po sila available unlike sa mga adult victim witnesses po ng human trafficking. So most of the victims of child trafficking comes from poverty-stricken families from different parts of the country and they were brought to Manila and to other highly urbanized cities as well as to abroad. So basically, bakit po ba dito sa Pilipinas maraming human trafficking cases? Kasi po, according to our geographical location, masyado po tayong malapit or tayo po ay tinatawag na source country, destination country, and transit country na tayo po ay pinapasok at dito din po lumalabas at tayo din po ay pinupuntahan ng mga foreigners abroad. So kaya po, ganun na lang po kalakas or sinasabi natin maraming talagang nabibiktima ng human trafficking po sa ating bansa. So according to Section 3A of 9208, the recruitment, transportation, transfer, or harboring or receipt of persons with or without victims' consent or knowledge within or across the national borders by means of threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, and abuse of power or position, taking advantage of vulnerability of the person, or giving or receiving payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation, which includes a minimum and exploitation for prostitution and other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor, servitude, slavery, or removal of or sale of organs. So basically, exploitation is the key thing po in terms of human trafficking. It could be in sex trafficking, labor trafficking. Wait lang po, parang may nag-a-admit po. Wala naman po. Labor trafficking. Oops,
Merong message na hindi, wala raw silang nadidinig. Paki-check naman.
wait lang po. Nasa na ba
Clear
siya?
naman po so far.
Clear naman po.
Yeah.
Okay? Labor trafficking, organ trafficking, child in armed conflict. So basically, I'll be sharing to you the exploitation for sex trafficking because according to the one po ng Rotary Club about sex trafficking and prostitution, so basically, dito po pumapasok yung exploitation for sex trafficking in terms of prostitution, pornography, and sexual exploitation, which masasabi po natin, very rampant po talaga sa Taguig as we manage po cases from the NCR. Manila and Taguig po are one of the hot spots here in NCR. Then for labor trafficking po, makita po natin ang forced labor as exploitation, death bondage, and involuntary servitude. So for now, I'll be discussing what is this called human trafficking in terms of prostitution. By the law, it was defined as prostitution, a business or practice in engaging in sexual activity in exchange of payment. So, alam naman po natin kung ano po yung nangyayari dito sa prostitution. Hindi ko na po kailangang i-elaborate. Then for the next one, it's the pornography. Dito na rin po pumapasok yung OSEC na masasabi po natin, sinasabi po nila na worst type of human trafficking, especially for the minors, kasi even though they were young, they had been sold or sold by their parents or other significant relative for individual na mas malapit sa kanila. Wherein a person is engaged in a real or simulated explicit sexual activities or any representation of sexual parts of a person. Then for the next one, for the sexual exploitation, this could be, again, in form of prostitution, pornography, or production of pornographic material. Then the next thing po, for the labor or forced labor of trafficking po. This could be a painful extraction for work or refers to a physical compulsion to work. Then, for the next thing po is labor trafficking as an involuntary servitude. This could be employees or a person in a private homes or forced to or coerced in serving or prudently convinced that they have no option to live. So ito po yung sapilitang pagtatrabaho na hindi po sila binibigyan ng karapatan nila habang sila ay nagtatrabaho. So I'll be sharing to you another type of labor trafficking. This could be the debt bondage. This could be individuals who are compelled to work in order to pay a debt and unable to live until the debt is repaid. Basically, ano po to? Most likely nangyayari po ito sa mga OFWs or other person po na makita natin sa abroad na sila po ay marami pong, kumbaga, maraming mga sa kanila ay isang halimbawa po nitong debt human trafficking po. Then for the slavery, ito po yung isang story ng isang Filipino na itinago natin sa pangalang Carl. So he went to Canada to work for 14 hours a day. And he was not permitted to take time off except for Christmas. He was told that you are here just to work, and you had, although we had so many men who has been working indeed. So he was contracted and in lieu of other person. So this person, Carl, did not know that he was a slave. The employer got paid without his knowledge knowing it, and Carl never got any money from his labor. So ganun po kalupit yung naging story ni Carl. So yung last type po ng human trafficking is organ trafficking. Meron po tayong malalaman or naririnig sa balita, pero mostly po sa amin dito sa DOJ, hindi po na furnish or na kakapasa yung case kasi pagdating na po sa case, may mga elements na pong nawawala. So ito po yung isang type ng human trafficking na nahihirapan din po kami in terms of acquiring the elements of the case. Ito pong organ trafficking. Kasi mostly po talaga yung iba kapag nakuha na nila yung bayad from a certain organ na kinuha sa kanila, hindi na po sila kumbaga, hindi na nila next step yung dapat po nilang gawin para ma-nourish yung case. So, nababaliwala po. But basically, organ selling or organ trafficking states that victims are forced into giving up organ, victims are deceived or cheated into giving an organ, and victims are treated for illness which may not exist then are removed without their knowledge. So malalaman po natin dito, di ba po before may mga naging cases din po ng mga story na yung mga bata ina-abduct, tapos wait, may admit lang po ako ha. In some time, pagka-abduct sa kanila, nakikita na lang yung corpse ng bata na patay na, tapos walang bituka or walang puso or walang kidney. So yun po yung mga sinasabi kong cases na hindi nanonourish kasi nga, nanonourish or umaakyat hanggang sa husgado kasi nga po kulang yung element. So yun po yung mahirap po talaga. So kailangan din po natin gawin din po yung best natin for us to have this cause in terms of organ trafficking. So other type po is child in armed conflict. So basically, we can see this not only here in Manila, but basically in other regions. So most vulnerable po dito is women and children. So ito po yung mga ginagamit ng mga bata or mga babae upang alam mo naman po natin na maging against sila or maging problema in terms of government. So this would be a government, some problems within the government po if they are being caught in terms of their vulnerability. So, according to the law, consent is not essential in terms of victims when you are asked po sa court if, for example, pinapakinggan na po yung kaso sa husgado. So, tatanungin, kailangan ba ng consent para yung bata i-ask for prostitution or other types of human trafficking? So basically, hindi po. Hindi kinakailangan yung consent nila. Basta katulad po ng nasabi ko kanina, basta merong purpose and ano po yung isa? Sa elements of the case, di ba may tatlo po? Means and act and purpose. Yun. So, wait, mag-a-admit lang po ako ha. So, according to the law po, hindi po kinakailangan ng consent upang mapalawig or manurish po yung case pagdating sa court. So, I'll be sharing to you some punishable acts. So, sino po ba yung mga dapat bigyan ng, ano bang tawag dito? Kumbaga, punish or bigyan ng husga kung ikaw po ay nasasabing nakagawa ng human trafficking. Yun po, maraming salamat Ma'am Alice. So, una, yung gumawa po ng human trafficking itself. Pangalawa, yung nag-promote. Pangatlo, yung nag-attempt. Yung nag-attempt po, yun po yung example, for example, okay, nahuli tayo, pero hindi nagamit or hindi na push through yung pag-traffic dun sa tao, yun po yung attempt na tinatawag. Then yung accomplice, halimbawa, ako po yung trafficker, tapos may isa akong kaibigan, sila yung tumulong sa akin para magkaroon ng transaction, siya po yung accomplice. Then, yung ikalima po, yung gumamit sa isang human trafficking victim or witness. So, yun po yung use of trafficking. So, sila pong lima, lahat po sila ay punishable or may
Kaparusahan.
Yun, may kaparusahan po ina-act sila as parusa or certain punishment from the law. So, I'll be sharing to you ano po ba yung acts na nagpro-promote ng human trafficking? Una, they are knowingly or listingly or subleasingly property for trafficking person. So ito po yung mga, halimbawa, rumirenta or nagsistay dun sa certain place para magkaroon ng transaction or ng trafficking itself. Pangalawa, they are the ones who fabricating pre-departure requirements for trafficking purposes. Ito po yung mga namimeke or gumagawa ng ibang materials para sa paglabas ng bansa. Pangatlo po, producing advertising by means and or promoting trafficking in persons. Ito po yung nagbibigay ng mga commercial ads or anything related to human trafficking. Then ikaapat po, assisting in misrepresentation of fraud to acquire clearances and exit documents for the purpose of trafficking in persons. Then ikalima po is assisting and facilitating exit or entry of persons in ports of trafficking purposes. So mostly po, makikita po natin ito sa mga ports, sa mga airports, sa ating mga social media, and other relevant places po na nag-act or nagpe-pertain in relation to human trafficking. Ika-anim po, they are knowingly benefiting from the labor of trafficking victims. Ika-pito po, some are tampering or destroying evidences or influencing witnesses in trafficking case. 8, destroying and concealing, removing, or confiscating travel or identification documents of persons to prevent restrict liberty of persons. Then 9, utilizing his or her office to impede the investigation, prosecution, or execution of law orders in a case of trafficking in person. So hindi lang po pala akusado ang bibigyan ng punishment, pati rin po pala mga government officials na hindi nag-follow through ng kanilang responsibility could be a accomplice or could promote human trafficking in persons. So according to Section 7C of 9208, it shall be prohibited for the DFA, DOLE, and POEA officials, law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and judges to urge complaints to abandon their criminal, civil, and administrative complaints for human trafficking. So, I'm sharing to you, ano po ba yung attempted trafficking in persons presumed when a child is a victim? First, facilitating the travel of a lone child without valid reason for proper permit or clearance or justification. Kaya po tayo, di ba, hinihinga ng travel document from the DSWD kapag may minor na magta-travel. So, yan po ang main reason kung bakit kailangan po natin mag-follow through ng process na yon. Second, executing an affidavit of consent for adoption for a consideration. So, adoption could be a factor of human trafficking din po. Third is recruiting a woman to bear a child for the purposes of selling the child. Dito na po pumapasok yung mga, gusto ko magkaanak. Tapos papagbuntis ko yung certain individual. So dun po pumapasok din na it could be a human trafficking. Then fourth is
Yung mga
simulating birth.
surrogate mothers.
Yes, exactly po, Professor. Mga surrogate mothers. But may mga special consideration and procedure din po tayo dyan prior on doing certain acts po na yan. Then fifth, soliciting a child and acquiring custody thereof through any means. Then, ano po ba yung sinasabi nilang qualified trafficking in persons? Kasi pag pinasa na po siya sa husgado, meron din pong mga elements at variables na kailangang i-achieve para masabi natin qualified na human trafficking yung case. Una, katulad po na nabanggit ko kanina, pag ang victim ay child, automatic po siya na qualified human trafficking except for, di ba, 3 elements po. Kahit 2 elements lang, wala na po tayong problema doon kasi nga, child victim is always be a qualified trafficking in person. Second, adoption of RA 8043 for the purposes of any sexual or labor exploitation. Then third, usually, ito po yung nangyayari kapag mga adults, if it was syndicated, it's 3 or more and above, automatic na po siyang large scale and qualified human trafficking na. Then fourth, if the trafficker is a spouse, ascendant parent, sibling, guardian, or person with authority over the victim or the crime is committed by a public officer or employee. Matik po siya na qualified human trafficking siya. Then, if the victim is recruited to engage in prostitution for any member of the military or law enforcement, if the offender is a member of a military or law enforcement agencies and the victim dies or becomes insane and suffer mutilation or suffers from HIV or AIDS, automatic po siyang qualified human trafficking in persons. So, ano po ba yung magiging penalty in case na mahuli or makita siya as trafficking case? So, services of human trafficked person for prostitution shall be penalized according to the law for 6 to 12 years imprisonment and a fine of 50,000 pesos but not more than 100,000 pesos. In terms of prostitution po yan. Then for sexual intercourse or acts of lasciviousness conducted with a child, according to the law, it could be a reclusion temporal in its medium period of reclusion perpetua. I'll admit someone, just hold on lang po. For 17 to 40 years and a fine not less than 500,000 but not more than 1 million pesos. So ganun po siya kalaki. Wait. So, the victims of human trafficking are considered as victims. They are not criminals. Cannot be punished for the crimes committed in their course of their victimization. So basically, ito po yung nagiging problem namin pag nakipag-usap na kami sa mga victims kasi natatakot po sila na, hala, kasi may utang pa ako kay boss kaya hindi ko masabing fully testimony ko against him. So, every time po, lagi namin pinapaalala na kapag kayo ay nabiktima ng ganitong, sitwasyon, huwag po kayong matakot kasi hindi po kayo kriminal, kundi kayo po ay mga biktima. So, kung ano man po yung nangyari within the course of victimization, lahat po yun ay mawawala dahil kayo po ay considered na victim but not criminal. So, next thing po is confidentiality. It is the main thing with the RA 9208 and 10364 na all circumstances, I'll admit, all circumstances regarding the human trafficking itself could be an absolutely all confidential. Pati po yung family and other related thing about them will be highly confidential. And may certain law din po regarding 10364 na nag-cater for the confidentiality thing po ng case as well as for the family. Yeah. And applies to anyone. No any socio-economic status background, no race, no anything, but to everyone po. Kahit mayaman, mahirap, Pilipino man or hindi, lahat po ay binibigyan ng confidentiality. So, confidentiality din po ba nag-a-apply siya sa mga traffickers? Number one, no, hindi po. Hindi kinakailangan na maging confidential kung ikaw ay naging trafficker. So, what are the common profiles or modus operandi of the traffickers? Ito po yung isa sa mga request ng Rotary Club kung ano po yung mga ginagawa ba ng mga traffickers. Una, sila po ay kilala sa community and related to someone in the community. So parang medyo popular po sila yung mga nagta-traffic. Pangalawa, pinapakita po nila na mayaman sila or capable sila sa pagbibigay ng pera. Pangatlo, kaya daw po nilang magbigay ng pera or any advances para lang sa kanilang mga fourth enticing promises. Kaya marami pong naloloko, especially yung mga mabababa or yung mga vulnerable po nating mga kababayan. Panglima, nagsasuggest po sila ng mga falsifications ng documents. Dito po natin mahuhuli yung mga birth certificate, yung mga passport na mga peke at iba pa po. Pang-anim, nagsasabi po sila na mabilis lang kayo mai-employ, basta sabihin nyo lang ganito, ganyan. Pang-apat, may mga malalaki pong salaries na hindi naman equated sa kanilang qualification. 8, unclear working conditions and destinations. Dito na po pumapasok yung mga OFWs na magiging illegal recruitment and other human trafficking types po. Then number 9, shy of enticing parents or hindi sila natatakot or hindi sila nahihiya na lokohin yung mga magulang na pwede pong magtrabaho yung mga minor yung anak. So yan po yung siyam na mga profile or siyam na types ng mga traffickers para i-entice nila ang mga victims po ng human trafficking. So here are the challenges, but basically these are the common things that happen in the legal issues of human trafficking. Ito po yung mga difficulties and hindrances na everyday lagi po namin nakikita sa court, sa labas ng court, or during the process po ng case build-up. First is the fast turnover of the police officers. Basically, once we've trained several individuals in a certain station, after some time, na-promote po sila. So yung training na ginawa namin between DOJ and other law enforcement agencies, nahirapan kami kasi na-promote na si police officer ganyan. So yung KSAO na nasa kanila, nawala na kasi promoted na si sir. Second, lack of manpower. Diba, alam naman po natin na within the government, there are a lot of programs and things that happen. So, kulang po kami sa tao. Then, number 3, not all regions have all task forces. Hindi pa po fully furnished or fully equipped sa buong regions yung mga task forces katulad po ng nandito sa NCR. Fourth, comprehensive but complicated law leading to a different interpretation and appreciation of law. May mga fiscals and other significant court people pa din po na kahit anong training na binibigay sa kanila, may sarili po silang interpretasyon or appreciation ng law kaya nagkakaroon po lagi ng problema. The next thing is the modus operandi changes. So basically, di ba po before, nasa regular house bars lang yung prostitute hanggang sa napunta na po sa online sexual exploitation na kahit relative, binibenta nila yung mga mahal nila sa buhay. The next po is the few jurisprudence. Alam naman po natin na konti na nga yung lawyers and prosecutors and judges, yung iba namamatay pa. So, mas lalo pong lumiliit. yung mga nagtatanggol para sa ganitong mga katauhan. The next thing po is a victim testimony-centered cases. There are some judges that would really like to have victims even though it's not applicable. So nagiging issue din po yan in terms of jury, duration and run po nung case sa court. The next thing is the incomplete databases. As of the moment po, meron pa din po kaming problems in terms of databases between interagency among DSWD and other significant individuals po. Then fourth is, the next thing is the poor monitoring. As in, ang hirap po talagang i-monitor yung from a certain region to another, then transfer to NCR. Kaya medyo natatagalan po talaga yung process ng pagkakaroon po ng deliberation ng case. The next thing, hindi po mawawala corruption. Then trial delays. There are a lot of issues regarding trial delays. This could be because of like for the victims, for the judges na may certain event din or the prosecutors would do na hindi po siya ganun kadali na isip talaga kaya ang dami pong factors kung bakit nadidelay yung procedure. Then the next thing is the budget constraints and politics. So basically, these are the reasons why there are difficulty in handling this certain case po. Wait lang po, parang nalobat ako. Sorry. Then, if there are some significant RAs or laws pertaining to human trafficking, ito po yun. These are the revised penal code, the RA 100022 or the Act of Migrant Workers Act, then RA 6955 for mail order bride law, RA 8243 for Inter-Country Adoption Act of 1995, RA 8239 for Passport Act, then 7610 for the abuse and exploitation of children and women, RA 9231 for worst forms of child labor, 7170 for Organ Donation Act, and 995 for Anti-Photo and Video Voyeurism Act. In pertaining to OSEC din rin po ito. And RA 9775 for pornography and 10365 for money laundering. So I'll be sharing po kung saan po kayo pwedeng mag-send ng inyong message if meron po kayong nakikita na sa tingin nyo is possible human trafficking case po. Hindi naman po sa pag may kasama lang na, for example, kano or foreigner na may bata, as i-report nyo na po sa amin. Hindi naman po agad-agad. Yung balay po natin, tito lang niya yung kanok na yun or individual na yun. Pero, ibigay nyo pa rin po sa amin para at least kami po yung mag-check or yung mga law enforcement agency po ang bahalang magawa ng case build-up niyan. Basta maaari nyo lang po siyang, maaari nyo po kami makita sa Facebook. Ang aming pong account is Interagency Council Against Trafficking. Tatype nyo lang po yan sa inyong Facebook search at lalabas na po. Yung nasa rightmost logo po na blue bilog, yan po yung logo ng agency namin. Under po kami ng DOJ. Or you can call or text po sa 1343. Yan po yung 24/7 hotline na pwede nyo pong i-connect or i-contact if you have certain thing or certain person or individual na sa tingin nyo po is na traffic or may something sketchy po sa kanila. You can email it to 1343actiononline@cfo.gov.ph or sa Facebook din po yung 1343action and web as 1343actiononline.ph. Or pwede nyo rin po siya sa inyong mobile app at you can also call po yung 911 emergency hotline kahit ano pong sa tingin yung krimen or anything, sila po yung magre-respond. So, I hope meron po kayong nakatcha. Sobrang dami po ng information. But if you have any question or anything po, you can just email us din po. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, please transfer the host.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Jaire Vito, for sharing us your expertise. Indeed, you have equipped every participant to broaden their knowledge in human trafficking. And now, to enlighten us more on human rights, especially on women, children, may we have Ms. Samil Meguko Factor, our club extension officer, to introduce to us our next guest speaker.
Good evening to all. It is a great pleasure for me to be tasked to introduce our distinguished guest speaker tonight. She is from Gabriela Network of Professionals. I strongly believe that she is an expert in the field of human rights. It is our pride to have a member of the Gabriela Network of Professionals. This organization is an exclusive group of women who are professionals in various fields of education. To mention, some are educators, researchers, mass media, practitioners, artists, health professionals, computer experts, information specialists, BPO workers, entrepreneurs, economists, lawyers, and other professions named in this organization has it. They are either employed in the private or public sector. As a member of this organization, she is committed to pursue the different programs of Gabriela, first among women of ranks, and secondly, linked to the service of women from the masses, who are either workers, urban poor, or ethnic, and uphold the dignity and equality with men in a just, free, and prosperous society. Ladies, I am proud to present to you our distinguished guest speaker, Miss Lovely Ramos.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
And thank you for inviting me to speak here, especially now that we're celebrating the International Human Rights Day. So let me just share my screen with you so we can go through the presentation. All right. So just a brief background also before we start this talk. So we at Gabriela Network of Professionals, I'm the Secretary General of the organization. So we are under Gabriela National, but we're mostly, as also mentioned with that introduction, is that we're mostly organizing women who are working right now. So just like me, I'm also working for like a private corporation, but also at the same time, trying my best to actually cater to these kinds of efforts as well, especially right now that the times are more in demand or are more needing of these efforts to forward the human rights, especially the human rights of women and then children. So for this one, we have also presented this talk to different communities, especially the mass communities. Kaya later on, as you go through the slides, there are some questions that might sound actually normal for us or baka sabihin natin na tama naman or mali naman. But for many communities out there, meron pa rin talaga silang ibang perspective when it comes to harassment, when it comes to abuse. Sometimes it's very surprising to hear their insights and stories. Pero that's where we come in. So upon presenting this presentation, it's not only just to educate each and everyone here, but also to be the bridge to enlighten them about abuse, about violence, because that's our role to educate these people who have actually molded that kind of perspective out of their situation na rin. And kahit hindi naman nila ginusto yun, parang ganun nahulma yung pag-iisip nila dahil na rin sa kalagayan nila sa buhay. So our objective for today ay mapalalim ang pag-unawa sa pang-aabuso sa kababaihan, women, and how we can collectively actually solve and end this problem, diba? So it's not only just about responding to this problem, but most importantly, putting an end to it because kapag parami ng parami ang nagiging biktima, mas nahihirapan din tayong isa-isang respondehan nito, no? At kapag lumalala yung sistemang ginagalawa nila at mas umiigting ang pang-aabuso sa mga kababaihan, ay mas lalo rin silang nahihirapan to come out and actually tell their stories or at least seek justice. So, for the first part of this one, I will just take you through these questions that we normally ask people and actually give you just a background on how some of them actually react. So, normally we ask them kung tama ba o mali ang mga statements na ito. So, for example, ang babae ay nagagahasa, dala ng sexing pananamit. And a lot of people will actually tell siguro na, of course, this is not true, but sadly, many communities nga still believe that this is true. For them, madali silang, ang mga ibang nanay din sa iba't ibang komunidad, sa tingin talaga nila, ito ang isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit naabuso, kung bakit nagagahasa ang mga kababaihan. Second is, kaya nagagahasa ang babae ay dahil umuuwi siya ng gabi o madaling araw. And then, kaya nagagahasa ang babae ay dahil palakaibigan siya sa mga lalaki. Kaya rin daw nabubugbog ang mga babae ay dahil mabunganga o nagger siya at hindi naaasikaso ang mga gawaing pambahay. And this one is very much relatable to different mothers especially and women na parang ganito sila kanila ipinaintindi dito na baka kaya ako sinasaktan ng mister ko, baka kaya nito ginawa ay dahil masyado akong mabunganga, baka masyado akong maraming sinasabi or baka hindi ko nagagampanan ang tungkulin na ine-expect sa akin ng society, 'di ba? Because we always have the social construct of how it is to become a housewife, how it is to become a mother, and when she's not able to fulfill those jobs, she thinks that will be the reason, that will be an enough reason for her to get abused or to suffer from abuse. Ang karahasan sa pagitan ng mag-asawa o magkarelasyon ay pribado. So, many of us especially think that these kinds of abuses, these kinds of fights are just between the two persons, just the husband and the wife. And especially with the Filipino culture, we always think that invading that kind of privacy na parang makikialam ka lang sa kapitbahay mo or sa kilala mo is already parang masyadong invasive. Kaya sa atin, whenever we know those kinds of abuses, despite them happening just near us, we tend to just ignore them because we think that it is not our place to speak out against these kinds of abuses. And then, tama or mali, ang pagpasok sa prostitusyon ay kagustuhan ng babae. Of course, this has always been a running argument, especially right now. Because they think that prostitution, that's your choice. You're still earning money out of it. But what we would like to enlighten everyone, and as we go through the presentation, what we'll know is that many of them, as also mentioned by Jair a while ago, this is not their choice really, but this is because of poverty, because this is how they were made to believe that this is the easiest way, most convenient way that you can earn money as long as you're a woman and you have a body to sell. So later on, we'll find out ano pa ba yung reasons behind it and how are we going to respond to these kinds of sentiments. Nakakapang-abuso lamang daw ang mga lalaking may sakit sa pag-iisip, nagda-drugs, or those who don't have stable jobs. But later on, we'll also see who are the kinds of abusers that we deal with every day. Ang karahasan sa kababaihan ay tumatagos sa lahat ng antasalipunan, meaning it affects everyone from every sector, whether you're from the mass, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, whether you're professional, whether you're not working. So, ayun din yung gusto nating ipaintindi, no? So, abuse doesn't select anyone, and anyone or everyone doesn't deserve to be abused as well. So karamihan sa kababaihang biktima ng karahasan ay nagsusumbong sa pulis at kaukulang otoridad. And the common response that we get from this part especially is that women don't normally go to the authorities. Women don't normally seek for justice the first time they experience abuse. Many times they hide it, many times they keep it private because they fear na baka sila yung mahusgahan. So parang ganun yun din yung nakakalungkot when it comes to like human rights, especially here in the Philippines, na kung sino pa yung naaabuso, sila pa yung mas natatakot mahusgahan and sila pa yung madalas nahuhusgahan also. That's why they had this kind of thinking because they've seen it. They've seen it grown worse over the years. And that's what we want to actually address. So first, let's define ano nga ba ang pang-aabuso. What is abuse? So, ang pang-aabuso sa kababaihan ay ang paggamit ng anumang dahas, pananakot o panlilinlang na nagresulta sa pisikal, sexual o psychological na pinsala sa biktimang babae. Whenever we hear the word abuse, we always assimilate it with physical abuse. And of course, that is a huge part of that, diba? Ayun kasi yung parang sobrang telling sign. But many people don't realize is abuse comes in all forms. So it's not just about physical or sexual abuse, but more specifically like psychological abuse din and financial. So, if your partner, bagamat hindi kanya nasasaktan o napagbubuhatan ng kamay, pero natatakot ka niya at nagkakaroon ka ng problema psychologically, nagkakaroon ka ng nagiging unstable ang iyong emosyon or mental health, that is also a significant or also an alarming sign of abuse na kailangan din natin tugunan. So abuse happens in different places. So it doesn't just happen in dark places, dark streets, kahit anong araw pa yan. But we have also seen a rising case of abuses and harassments in workplaces, offices, in houses, especially during the lockdown. We have seen a rising number of domestic violence. We have been receiving more and more cases about domestic violence dahil nga naman mas magkasama yung mag-asawa sa dalawang bahay. So, they are more prone to arguments, misunderstanding, and worst is physical abuse. And then communities as well, and then schools. So, kanina meron tayong parang rundown on paano ba yung tama or mali when it comes to their perspective about abuse. And we just like to clarify na gabi man o umaga, of course, that's gonna happen anywhere and anytime. And then, of course, all women suffer from different kinds of abuses. And yun nga, mayaman ka man, mahirap, artista, manggagawa, estudyante, balot man ang damit mo o kaya hindi, di ba? I think that is the primary statement that we can actually hinge on whenever they tell people na nare-rape ka because of the way you dress. But even in different countries, even here in the Philippines, nakapagbalot na yung damit nila because of their culture, because of their religion, they still suffer from physical abuse. They still suffer from sexual abuse. So it's not the way you dress. It's not a basis to actually experience any kind of harassment or abuse. So, because of that, simultaneously, kung lahat ng babae ay prone to abuse or lahat ng tao ay prone to abuse, of course, lahat din ng tao ay maaaring maging abuser. So, these people, these men, na halimbawa sinasabi nila, kaya siya nga abuso ay dahil ang drugs, tapos yung isang edukado, yung isang professional, for example, na partner, ang tingin nila ay walang kakayahang mga abuso, pero hindi naman doon nasusukat ayun, di ba? At the end of the day, it's still about how the person treats another person. So, let's get to know the different forms of abuse, especially here in the Philippines. So, rape or panggagahasa is, of course, the most common type of abuse. One woman or child is actually raped every hour. Right now that we're talking, it might be happening already somewhere else. And ito ay pamimilit sa babaeng makipagtalik. Ngunit kahit walang pamumwersa, maituturing itong rape kung wala sa tamang pag-iisip ang biktima. I think Jairi has also mentioned this one. So, hindi lang siya yung pagpwersa sa'yo na makipagtalik kahit na okay yung pag-iisip. But of course, those who suffer or those who have special needs, kapag walang malay ang biktima, for example, they purposely drug the victim or nilasing ng sadya ang biktima para magkaroon ng panggagahasa. Or wala pang 12 taong gulang ang biktima. Although later on, we're gonna talk about the updated status of statutory rape here in the Philippines. Nasisiraan ng bait ng biktima, gumagamit ng panloloko ang na biktima, at ginagamit ng biktima ang kanyang otoridad. Or there's this power threat to the victim, no? Na kapag mas mataas siya, for example, in the office, kapag boss mo siya, kapag sa school, kapag prof mo siya, anything that has to do with their power and how they can manipulate people, that is also kind of abuse or rape. So there are different kinds of harassments as well. So there's this thing we call date or acquaintance rape. This is of course done by your intimate partner. Now, I would just like to clarify kasi ano ba yung law na saklaw nitong pang-aabuso between two individuals who share an intimate relationship. Now, why do I say na it's an intimate relationship? Because it doesn't matter whether you're married or not. Actually, kahit hindi kayo magkarelasyon talaga, as long as you have an intimate relationship, ay magfo-fall siya sa Violence Against Women na law natin, RA 9262. So, ang law na yun, specifically, ay para sa mga biktima ng pang-aabuso na nasa isang relasyon, no? Na nasa isang intimate relationship. So iba pa ang Violence Against Women and Children Act or 9262 sa ating mga criminal cases like rape, no? So iba pa 'yon kasi madalas tinatanong ng mga tao, can I file for a Violence Against Women Against Children Act? Can I file that case against someone na wala akong intimate relationship, as in stranger lang? Hindi po, no? Sa iba po yun magpo-fall. It can fall under rape, which is also a criminal law, or statutory rape kapag ito ay pag 12 years old or 16 years old na actually ngayon ang tinataguyod natin. So yun, violence against women and children is just for partners, but you don't have to be married. You don't have to actually have a label when it comes to relationship. Stranger rape, ito yung hindi kakilala ang gumawa. Gang rape, of course, ito ay ang ginawa ng higit isang lalaki. And then, incest is the sexual abuse na nangyayari na ginagawa ng isang kamag-anak. So, tatay, tito, ayun yung madalas na dumadating din ng mga case reports recently. Statutory rape, ang biktima ay nasa 12 taong gulang, pero yun nga, I will walk you through the new statutory rape clause and what we're looking for. So, ito yun. So, statutory rape now, the House panel already approved bill raising age for statutory rape to 16 years old because in Southeast Asia, tayo yung may mababang edad, no? 12 years old lang dati yung yung basis natin for statutory rape and napakamurang edad kumbaga. So just recently this year, they have finally approved the bill to raise the age for statutory rape to 16 and we welcome this victory, especially for the victims of abuse who didn't know what kind of law can actually support them in seeking justice. So while the law also criminalizes sex with minors under age 18, it only does so if consent is not present or if the act involves force, threat, or intimidation. So the substitute bill further seeks to amend the definition of rape to include certain acts of perversion for sexual gratification and will not extinguish criminal liability despite the presence of forgiveness or subsequent marriage between rapist and the victim. So honestly, our rape laws, even the violence against women law, madami pa talagang kailangang amendments yan. And one of the concerns talaga of the victims when it comes to that is the definition of consent. Wala tayong malinaw na definition ng consent dun sa mga batas natin. So, for example, sinabi ng biktima na nalasing ako, 'di ba? Hindi nila mabigyan yon ng ebidensya na enough evidence yon to pass as abuse because they think na baka consent mo yon, baka sign of consent mo yon, di ba? So we need to define those kinds of aspects when it comes to consent para rin ma-solidify natin our laws that could actually protect and give justice to these victims. Apart from statutory rape is of course marital rape. Contrary to the popular belief na kapag mag-asawa na kayo, wala nang rape, diba? Pero the truth is, even if you're married, as long as you are forced to do sex, to actually be forced to do something that will still fall under marital sex. Rape slay or rape with murder, ito yung mas worse talaga because merong paninikil or murder after the rape act itself. And then state forces perpetrated. This is mostly, actually, ito yung paggamit ng otoridad mo, whether you're from the military, from the police, as long as you have an authority in like public service, kapag ginamit yan just to manipulate you, to threaten you, or to get something that they want, that will also fall under one common kind of abuse. Now, sexual harassment is pagbibigay sa babae ng sexual na atensyon o pagkilos na may mali siya. So, hindi ito, walang kailangan, sorry for that term, pero ganito na rin naman, walang kailangan penetration for sexual harassment to actually be valid. Because it can be physical, it can be verbal, and also non-verbal, as long as there's malice. No, so as long as naging uneasy yung babae sa ginawa ng isa, that can already fall under sexual harassment. So it's very essential to actually support the feeling and the perspective of the victim. Now, this is even more vital these days because of victim blaming. Victim blaming has been one of the worst problems that we have right now because these victims, kapag nag-out na sila finally after a long time, nakakaranas sila mismo ng pangungutya or judgments from other people. Kaya it's very essential for us to actually acknowledge the stories of the victims. And it's very essential for them to actually have someone listen to their stories and believe their stories more so as an important sign of support that they can actually have. So, hindi mahalaga dito ang intensyon o persepsyon na ng biktima, meaning anuman ang dahilan ng biktima ng suspect as long as nang abuso siya, of course, wala tayong ano doon, hindi yun mahalaga. Because at the end of the day, kapag nagawa mo na yung act of harassment, hindi mo na siya madedefend kahit ano pa ang maging dahilan mo. Now, pang-aabuso sa asawa o karelasyon, yung sinasadya at kadalasang paulit-ulit ni pang-aabuso sa babae ng kanyang karelasyong lalaki, kasalman o hindi, which again falls under violence against women. And of course, we still see na, of course, child trafficking is under abuse because a lot of girls, young girls, are victims of it, as also taken through by Jaire a while ago. So, for example, the island of Mindanao has become one of the trafficking hotspots because of armed conflict, and also major cities here and in Malaysia. And then, ano ba yung pinapromise sa trafficking victims? Mostly jobs such as domestic helpers or entertainers. Pero at the end of the day, nalalaman nila na they're being brought to prostitution rings. So there is a high incidence of child prostitution here in the Philippines. Now, here in this photo, you can see, actually meron na itong documentary before na kapag nasa probinsya ka, wala yang gadgets, wala yang ref, sobrang payak ng bahay. Pero makikita mo, meron siyang laptop, meron siyang internet. So, mahirap sila sa iba't ibang aspeto, pero makikita mo lagi na parang ang pinag-iinvestan, kumbaga, ng magulang ay laptop at internet. So, when asked why, it was directly linked to actually child prostitution, and this is alarming because that just means that even their family members are the main drivers to prostitution ng mga bata. So within 3 years, the estimated prevalence rate of internet-based child sexual exploitation in the Philippines more than tripled. So nakaka-alarma yung rate niya. Dahil sabi nga natin, technology now is more accessible, it keeps on evolving. But the evil side of that one is because it's more accessible now and it's now faster to connect to different parts of the world, it has also been an avenue for people to actually exploit children, especially girls. So from 43 out of 10,000 internet protocol addresses in the Philippines used for child exploitation in 2014, nag-jump siya to 149 agad in 2017. So, ganun kabilis yung pagdami ng IP addresses na mas linked sa sexual exploitation ng mga bata. So, right now, yun nga, we have the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act in 2003, which mandates the establishment of the Interagency Council Against Trafficking in Persons. And no matter how hard we actually forward this law, our role talaga is to enlighten the communities. Because if this is happening within the family already, then that means they're losing opportunities to other jobs, no? Because that's also one of the reasons why they enter that one. So for parents who don't have jobs, who don't have access to opportunities and even education, parang ang ginagawa nilang pang-alay, 'di ba? Or kita ng pera ay yung kakayahan ng bata na mag-provide ng ganitong pera or amount ng pera by doing this certain act. So again, pang-aabuso transcends everything from physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, and of course financial, even financial manipulation within a household. For example, kapag yung babae ay hindi pinapayagan na magtrabaho, 'di ba, kahit gusto niya. And also kapag kinukuha ang pera niya, ayan ay sign na rin ng financial manipulation or financial abuse. So according to the National Demographic and Health Survey, 1 out of 4 women from 15 to 49 years old have already experienced physical, emotional, and sexual abuse na ginagawa madalas ng kanilang asawa or partner. And batay din sa karanasan nila, pinipili nilang tumahimik dahil nagiging cycle siya eh. And when it has already become a cycle, parang iniisip na ng biktima na maybe this is normal, maybe I have to embrace this life. And kapag lumabas ako ngayon, kapag nagsabi ako na abuse ako ngayon, baka i-judge nila ako, no? Bakit ngayon mo lang to sinabi, diba? So marami silang fears and traumas in mind. That's why they can't get out of that kind of abusive relationship. So apart from these ones na mas may direct abuse, na merong physical sign of abuse. Of course, prostitution is also kind of abuse here. First world countries, they think na pag prostitution ka, that's a kind of liberation for women because that's your choice, sell your body and earn from it. But for a third world country like the Philippines, that's not the case. No, it's not just about choosing prostitution because I like to do it. A majority of those who enter prostitution are just really victims of poverty. And apart from becoming victims of poverty, the society has also framed their thinking na this is the easiest way to earn money. So because of that, kapag nakikita natin na walang sapat na oportunidad para sa mga kababaihan, para sa mga bata na makapag-aral, that is a kind of abuse in the society na mas kailangan din natin respondihan para hindi na mangyari yung mas worst kinds of abuse or para hindi sila malimitahan on what they can do, what opportunities they can actually explore. And then sex trafficking, of course, is part of that, not only here in the Philippines, pero some of them have reached Malaysia na. Yun yung pinaka-common din nila na destination. And then white slavery. Ito yung mga babaeng kinukulong sa kasa at hindi binibigyan ng hati sa pinagbentahan sa kanila. So, even the victims of human trafficking, of sex trafficking, their main impression is that I can earn something from it. But even in that kind of environment, in their workplace itself, nagkakaroon ng pang-aabuso kasi minsan hindi sa kanila binibigay yung dapat na kinikita nila, 'di ba? So parang doble ang bagsak sa kanila ng pang-aabuso dahil yung palang choice nila to enter sex trafficking is already a kind of abuse, but second is also kapag nandun na nga sila, 'di ba? In-embrace nila yung ganong lifestyle, hindi pa sila kumita ng pera na ina-expect nila. And then, of course, pornography. So, for child pornography and even, of course, adult pornography, ito yung paggamit sa katawan ng babae bilang kalakal upang makapagbigay ng sexual na aliw. During this lockdown, apart from domestic violence, we've gotten an increasing reports, even on social media, if you check it. Napakaraming babae ngayon, mostly millennials, mostly teenagers, who actually have come forward because of electronic violence, meaning they have eventually found out that their photos, their private photos, are now leaked online and even sold. Actually, meron dyan yung mga binibenta daw ng mga sets ng photos, like 5 photos for 20 to 50 pesos. So that low amount of money, but more so, an alarming sign na people are not just only leaking these photos, but exploiting this, actually trying to earn something out of this without the consent of the victim, of course. And then electronic violence against women, this one needs really to be strengthened right now because ngayon, ang mga nagiging biktima ng abuso sa online, they just normally go to NBI cybercrime, no? So while there's that, we have also received like several feedbacks na it's not always easy to get response to it because evidence-wise, that's where they are more questioned the most. Because kapag electronic violence yan, kapag may nag-leak ng photo mo, you can't easily identify the exact person who actually did it because it's just online. They can have an anonymous Facebook profile, they can have just a website without any specific person behind it. So, ayun na medyo nagiging struggle. How can you prove evidence? How can you give evidence if the abuse or if your photos are already spread online. So, ayun yung mga kailangan pa nating work out as we try to solve every facet of abuse here in the Philippines. And then, sa paggawa, meaning in the workplace, hindi lamang pang-aabuso yung pagbubuhatan ka ng kamay sa isang paggawaan. So, of course, involved in abuse is, of course, any form of discrimination. For example, yung may mga yung may mga, what do you call this? Meron silang mga panawagan, for example, na nag-hire sila ng mga manggagawang babae pero nakalagay doon with pleasing personality, for example. Or yung iba pa nagkakaroon ng pregnancy test, virginity test. Of course, those are very much intrusive, but also, why does it have to depend on those things? And then physical and sexual is, of course, a facet of workplace abuse. So, dahilan ng pang-aabuso, as also mentioned a while ago, walang tamang rason o dahilan kung bakit naaabuso ang mga kababaihan. Ngunit ilan sa mga naghubog sa pag-iisip ng mga gumagawa nito ay ang mga sumusunod. So, again, there's no valid reason for abuse, but there's certain aspects that we also need to understand to be able to address abuse in the long run. First is gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is the expectations that the society has set to women, especially the traditions set na talagang nagpapaigting lalo sa violence against women. So, according to our history, madalas na rin inaasahan yung lalaki na nakakapagtrabaho at tagapagtaguyod ng pamilya ang nakakaangat. So, parang feudal times or feudalism pa lang, they already introduce this kind of framing in the society na ang lalaki lang ang may kakayahan na magsaka or mag-hunt, for example, dahil daw biologically hindi ito kaya ng babae, no? So even the menstruation itself, biologically, no, kapag daw nag-hunt yung babae before, hindi siya parang cast away niya yung mga dapat nilang i-hunt na animals. Kaya hindi sinasama yung babae, no? So, may physical or biological na reason na gano'n, na mas lalo nagkaroon ng shape yung feudal or this kind of gender-based violence or societal expectations on whether what a woman and what a husband can actually do. And then, of course, the patriarchal system that we have right now, which only intensified in different departments, in different facets, in different aspects, and the objectification of a woman's body. We can see this one on advertisements na tinuturing nakalakal ang katawan ng babae at ginagamit para mabenta ang mga produkto sa pamilihan. Especially these days, you can still see that on billboards, on social media, and these things has actually contributed to that kind of gender-based violence. So, impunity is also a part of this one, meaning hindi napaparusahan yung mga may sala, especially if they have the power. No? And this is one of the main reasons of the victims on why they don't want to seek justice to do something about abuse, because they always hear stories na hindi naman nabibigyan ng hustisya yung mga lumalapit, especially if they're especially if they're ordinary citizens with no connections, no power. So they feel discouraged already because of the stories na yun nga, napapalaya din naman or napopromote bigla yung mga nang-aabuso sa kanila. So there's really a deeper reason on why there has been an intensified kind of abuse in our society now. So because of that, the most vulnerable sectors or the most vulnerable women who experience abuse are, of course, those who are from the mass, right? Those who don't have jobs, those who mostly stay in communities, those who haven't even finished their studies or studied at all. Sila yung pinaka-vulnerable dito because they don't have enough knowledge on what their rights are. We've been talking about human rights. For example, today, Human Rights Day siya, pero a lot of people don't really get to understand what human rights is, what their human rights are. And that is the main step to actually raise awareness on this one. Kasi kung alam mo yung karapatan mo, mas kaya mong respondehan ito. And kaya lahat binabatay muna natin sa awareness sa kanila rin para mas malaman din natin kung paano ba natin bibigyan ng hustisya yung mga naabuso. Now, after talking about the different kinds of abuse, after talking about who can do it, and who are the most vulnerable sectors that suffer abuse, paano ba natin siya nilalabanan? So first is, of course, pagpapanagot sa may sala. We file a case. This is the most legal route that we can do for that one. And the primary step to actually file an abuse is to file the initial case report. So every barangay should have a women's desk. Unfortunately, whenever we present it, and some residents have reported na hindi rin alam ng barangay nila na dapat pala may women's desk kami. 'Di ba? So, at ito palang first stage na to, kapag hindi nila alam na dapat pala may women's desk tayo dito na tutugon sa mga ganitong proseso, medyo doon na sila na-discourage. Pero every barangay talaga so far is required to have a women's desk to receive reports and to process the initial stage of case reports. Sa karanasan, sa pamamagitan ng lupong tagapamayapan, nire-resolba ang mga usapin, and there will be 3 hearings on a barangay level na sa karanasan ay ilang buwan din ang lumilipas. Siyempre, matagal talaga ang pag-usad ng hustisya dito sa Pilipinas especially. And kung wala siyang outcome, that's when they'll issue a certificate to file action para magamit sa pagsampa sa reklamo sa pulis o sa korte. Ngayon, what can women do kung walang barangay women's desk? If there's no barangay women's desk or hindi okay yung barangay women's desk, they can go straight to the police actually. So they don't, this is just the most accessible way, especially for the communities kasi sa barangay talaga unang lalapit yan eh. Pero kung wala talaga doon, you can directly go to police or to the court. So according to RA 9262 or Violence Against Women and Children, again, this law just covers victims of abuse who are in a relationship or an intimate relationship. Hindi po pinagkakasundo yung suspect and victim, no? Because the barangay culture, laging sinasabi sa atin ng mga nagre-report is pinagbabati lang sila ng barangay captain. Parang sinasabi lang na pag-usapan, ayusin, and then move forward. But under RA 9262, hindi po tama yun, no? When a victim has already decided to actually come out and report a case, that means she wants to do something about it. So, talking, communicating, I'm pretty sure they've already tried those things. So, ang mas nila dito is legal assistance talaga. So, dahil dyan, ano ba yung mangyayari? They shouldn't be living in the same roof, especially for women and children. Halimbawa, kung meron silang kasamang tatay na nangaabuso, dapat malayo sila doon, di ba? They shouldn't be living together. And to do that, many of the victims filed barangay protection order. So this is an example of a barangay protection order form. So can just fill it out or ask your barangay about it. So the name of the respondent, the date issued, and then the clause of it. However, the barangay protection order expires, no? So kahit weeks, nag-expire yan. And 15 days lang effective ang barangay protection order. And of course, it's a very short period of time considering na wala pang uusad sa kaso mo niyan. So if you wish to extend this one, you can ask daw your barangay, pero it's not always approved, or you can just ask for a temporary protection order instead from the court. So the process to file a criminal case under Violence Against Women and Children is first, of course, the incident. Second is yung pagsampa ng reklamo sa barangay o sa police, sa women's desk. And then pagpapa-medical legal. Medical legal is for those who really have telling signs, physical signs of abuse. Ngayon, medical legal, tinatanong sa atin, can I ask for medical legal anytime? Can I ask for medical legal at any hospital? The answer is no. You just have to go to a public hospital. Ang pampublikong hospital lang po ang magre-release ng medical legal. And minsan, may mga naabuso na gumaling na yung sugat, diba? Or medyo matagal bago nila napagdesisyonan na they will file a case. And their worry is, kapag wala na ba akong pasa, kapag wala na ba akong medical legal, mawiwikan niya ba yung case ko? Hindi naman po. Hindi po ito all or nothing. You can still file a case despite the absence of medical legal as long as you have other evidences, as long as you have witnesses. Those are still kinds of support to or aspects that can actually support your case. And then, ipapasa yung kaso sa prosecutor's office. And pagkatapos ng isang buwan, pinakamadali na po yung isang buwan, pero madalas nagtatagal pa yan, magsisimula ang preliminary investigation. And from that kind of investigation, they will have a resolution. So there are 2 possible resolutions upon the preliminary investigation's results. So first is the probable cause. So isasampa na sa korte ang reklamo at magiging ganap na itong kaso. So ang prosecutor ang tatayong abogado ng biktima. So again, this is a long process. That's why whenever we have or we encounter victims, the first part of that is not only to ask what happened, but mostly prepare her for what's ahead. Because ito yung kailangan tayo maging transparent. Na this is not going to be an easy journey, definitely. This is going to be intoxicating because you have to narrate your experiences again and again. And kaya, kaakibat po ng legal na assistance is the para-counseling or the emotional assistance, psychological assistance for the victims. So it's not just about bombarding him or her with facts about the legal process, but of course, supporting her emotionally, psychologically, kasi nakakapagod po talaga yon. Mas lalong nakaka-stress yon for the mental health of the victim. And then, arraignment ng respondent, pre-trial conference, bago pa lumabas yung trial. So, ito, nasa regional trial court levels pa lang ito at hindi pa dumadating doon sa mas mataas na kaso. Another resolution is, of course, dismissed ang reklamo. Meaning, talagang hindi nila nakitang malakas ang ebidensya, so i-dismiss nila. But, the victim still has an option to ask for reinvestigation sa Department of Justice, pero ulit-ulit yung pag-iimbestiga mula sa unang proseso hanggang maglabas ng panibagong resolusyon. So, ayun po yung dalawa. And then, kapag nandun na sa Korte Suprema, merong dalawang desisyon ang judge. First is, of course, convicted, meaning napatunayang guilty ang suspect at ipapatupad ang sentensya o kaakibat na kaparusahan. And then, bagamat maaari pa siyang mag-apela hanggang Supreme Court, yung mismong suspect, no? And then, the other decision is, of course, acquitted, meaning wala siyang kasalanan kaya kailangan na siyang lumaya o nakakulong, or ang complainant ay hindi na maaaring mag-apela bagamat may mga pamamaraan ng legal na proseso hinggil dito. So, kapag acquitted na po yung kaso, madalas iniisip talaga natin, tapos na talaga lahat. And it's not hindi mo rin masisisi ang biktima dahil napakahaba nga ng proseso bago dumating sa desisyon na ito. Pero there's still legal supports or processes that can be done afterwards. So if the victim is still willing to actually pursue the case. So, ilan po sa mga batas that we have actually filed or Gabriela has actually filed to end abuse, to give justice to the abused victims, or of course, the RA 8353, ito po yung Anti-Rape Law of 1997. So, criminal act or criminal law na ito yung mas ginagamit kapag wala po sa isang relasyon, kapag wala pong intimate relationship ang nasasakdal. And then 10398, elimination of violence against women and children. Pero RA 9262 po yung para dun sa may intimate relationships. And then other bills are still pending just so we can have the amendments because as also mentioned a while ago, we still need a lot of legwork to do para masolidify natin yung mga existing laws natin on violence and abuse. These slides, I'll just breeze through it because these are mostly about workplace harassment. So ito po yung paggamit ng authority in a workplace harassment to get something. For example, promotion, for example, increase, or just admitting you into a certain kind of job but with a favorable sexual condition, that falls under workplace harassment. And it is the duty of the employer to actually prevent or deter these kinds of acts. And actually, hindi po natin alam to halos lahat, no? Pero dapat lahat ng opisina ay merong Committee on Decorum and Investigation of Cases on Sexual Harassment. The primary person that we usually contact whenever these kinds of things happen is HR. Ayun agad yung sasabihin na kanino mo sinabi to? Sa HR, diba? Kasi ayun lang yung madalas na meron sa isang kumpanya. Pero it's actually required for every company here in the Philippines to have a committee on decorum investigation of cases on sexual harassment. So yun, ayun po yung for the kind of abuse for the workplace. And then Magna Carta for women, we have special leave benefits for women already. And the Solo Parents Act, ito pa po ay iba pa to dun sa maternity leave na pwedeng ibigay sa kanila. So every solo parent is actually entitled to a flexible work schedule and also parental leave. So in addition pa to sa leave privileges niya under the existing laws, So parental leave of not more than 7 working days every year on top of your regular leave is actually should be given to solo parents. And then, of course, another major win is the 105-day maternity leave. Of course, triumph to sa mga kababaihan, but at the same time, a lot of companies use it to disqualify women na nag apply na buntis because their fear is napakahaba ng maternity leave agad na na dapat nilang ibigay. So again, after all of these things, matutugunan natin ito sa sama-samang pagkilos and dahil din sa sama-sama nating pagkilos, we're able to bring the suspects to jail, no matter how powerful they are, and we're able to actually do something in actual communities. So now, what is our role after attending this violence against women orientation? So siguro sa atin dito, merong mga nakaka-relate. But at the same time, may iba gustong malaman, how are we going to act on it? So first is to break the silence, basagin ang katahimikan, and just become the best listener of the abusers, because that's when we can convince them to actually break their silence and not fear anything. And then sumapi sa programa pangkababaihan, of course, collective work pa rin ito talaga, and this is very much important. A sexual abuse case is never an individual fight, and it will still cover all kinds of aspects, like yun nga, medical, may legal, may psychological, and of course may emotional. So yung support system dyan is talagang buong buo. And then discussions like these ones. So thank you again. And then organisahin ng mga survivors because they need that one. Makipag-ugnayan sa NGOs, pambansang institusyon, doktor, psychiatrists. And then, of course, support the campaign to end violence. So it's still the collective voice that will matter. So ito, nadaanan na rin naman natin to. So wala sa pananamit, wala sa oras, wala sa lugar ang pang-aabuso, at wala itong iisang mukha. So ano man ang pagsubok o balakid sa paglaban, ano man ang takot, tandaan na laging mayroong makikinig ng walang paghuhusga at susuporta. And I'm confident that within this group also, we know naman that each and every one of us here is a supporter. Where each and every one of us here is a listener, and because of those basic skills nga lang daw to pero hindi talaga siya nabibigay ng lahat ng tao, but these are the primary foundations to actually strengthen or encourage the victims of abuse and put an end to abuse. So again, thank you so much for this one. I hope you still got to learn something. Kapag meron po kayong katanungan, just message Gabriela Network of Professionals on Facebook. Sasagutin po natin.
Thank you very much, Miss Lovely.
Yes po.
Yes. Indeed, we are so grateful of choosing speakers like Miss Lovely and Mr. Jairi. Their talks are very much relevant in today's challenges where children, male and female alike, experience, which deprive them of knowing their rights to live in a healthy environment to enjoy a happy, safe life. I could feel our participants are very eager to raise their questions to be clarified on the issues discussed. But I would like to explain why we have chosen Miss Lovely from Gabriela, because right now, our organization, our club, is really facing a problem more on this child abuse. And really, we indeed invited you, Miss Lovely, because most of these people, most of our children, especially the female children, are really the victims of child abuse. And so to give you now, we give our floor to our forum facilitator, our PDC, Miss Alice Lucas, to entertain the questions that our participants would like to clarify on.
Thank you
So,
very
Miss
much.
Alice, you can already
Yeah,
open
thank
the
you very
floor for
much,
questioning.
Doc Letty Villaluz. Actually, we have a first question here from past President Malu Kagangpang.
Mm-hmm.
The question is the barangay can take action on human trafficking and or any women and children abuse if the family or any relative doesn't want to report it. So there is an answer from our first speaker. He said, we already acted programs to barangay levels regarding reporting of human trafficking. Another is, barangay has women and child officers to spare issues regarding human trafficking case. Basically po, first step po, reporting to barangay. Upon report, we can do po the procedure then to file sa prosecutor's office. And then another, there is also an offices, na police stations that has women and child protection officers. That was the answer of our first speaker, Mr. Jaire. Okay, so maybe we can have some questions from the participants. Since our guest speaker, Lovely, is here with us because Mr. Jaire is already out of for an appointment.
I'm back
So,
na po.
you're back? Okay, so
Yes po.
maybe we can have a question and answer portion from the participants. Can we have a raise of hand? We have here a reaction thing. How do you call this emoji ba to?
Yes po.
Yeah, or a raise of hand. Please ask questions from our guest speakers.
Actually, add ko lang po dun sa may barangay, no, on whether they can actually assist the victim kung ayaw nila mismo mag-report. Yes, definitely. Kaya on the first part of the presentation, we emphasize na to break the culture na kapag may nakikita ka na abuso sa harap mo, wala kang gagawin, no? Because all of us have the responsibility and have the power to report it.
Yes.
As long as there's a witness to that kind of abuse, that's enough. And you don't have to be relatives, kahit di kayo magkaibigan, no? Lahat yan, kasama yan, at ma-acknowledge yan as a kind of evidence or as a kind of witness to that kind.
Basically po talaga, first step po talaga within barangays, then afterwards, kung wala pong barangay, you can directly na po sa police. Then the police can transfer to us po sa prosecution. Para at least yung materiality po kasi ng case, as I was saying a while ago, di ba po may mga elements, yung 3 elements sa human trafficking. It is essential po to strengthen the elements for us to prosecute the case po properly and mas efficiently. Kasi isang element lang po yung mawala, the whole case might be a trash po. So very important po talaga yung, as I've discussed a while ago po for the element.
Okay. So any more questions? I have something in mind. Because we have beggars in the streets, I'd like to know if it is also part of human trafficking, wherein some syndicates bring them in the streets to beg. So is this a type of trafficking as well?
Opo, basta lang po, as I was saying, kailangan po yung 3 elements. Pag present po yun, pag concrete na po lahat ng documentation, kasi po it needs to have perfect documentation and reporting for us to acknowledge na yung kung certain incident na yun is materialized po for that certain case or RA. Kasi kung hindi po, in other related cases po siya ma-apply. Like for example, 29262, like pertaining to abuse of women and children po, not basically as trafficking. Depende po talaga sa elements po ng case.
Okay. So, do we have any questions to address to our guest speakers? More questions? It's our opportunity to ask them what is in our mind. Any more? Miss Lovely, actually, we would like to focus also on the child abuse because that was our favorite topic for you. And in fact, we have 3 victims that we are still trying to resolve on the child abuse. But we're supposed to have what you call this, a testimony from them, but because it is confidential and we have to pass through the DSW regarding this, so we were not able to get the video testimony. So what can you say about the child abuses?
Here po kasi, madalas na nakukuha namin from child abuse is out of like domestic violence din. So talagang ano siya, two-pronged na kasama ang babae, kasama ang bata. That's why one law that supports that is the Violence Against Women and Children Act. And doon po papasok yung witnesses and then yung protection order that should be given to them. Because most of the times, when the abuser is living in the same household with the children, their main, we have this notion na kapag tatay ang suspect, dapat magkasama pa rin sila ng bata. No? Pero that's not true. Of course, as also mentioned a while ago, there's no room to actually just talk about abuse. Kaya meron tayong protection order na tinatawag. So they have the right to actually have that and to be separated from the abuser. So kahit yung mga bata ay kasama doon. Now, for other kinds of abuses for children na mas common din in the Philippines is the prostitution or yun nga, which is also related to child trafficking. But our main challenge mainly right now is their families are the ones forcing them to do it. No, so it's not just about authorities or other people, but even their parents. So doon sila nahihirapan. Like, how can I file for this one if my family is the one making me do it? So, doon po lalabas yung malaking role mismo ng social workers, ng barangay officials to respond to that. Because most of the time, these children, of course, they don't know who to approach. And parents yan parents yung sasabihan And parents din yung kinakatakutan nila. So, doon po papasok talaga yung integration not only of the legal perspective na may lawyer ka, but social workers ng sa children so that they can guide them like with the different programs that they have to undergo because of the effects of the abuse.
Okay, Mr. Jaire answered us a while ago regarding questions on how do we go about the processes if you have cases. But the problem is sometimes you bring them to the barangay, but there are so many, how do you call this, mga hearings, etc., wherein nasasawa na tuloy yung victims to pursue their case. So how do we do that? How can we help them?
Ma'am, nasa shelter po ba sila? Sorry, Ma'am Lovely.
Sino nasa shelter?
Go lang. Okay.
Nasa shelter po ba yung mga victims na binabanggit niyo po, Ma'am? Or nasa certain relative po?
Nasa relative sila. Nasa relative sila. Pero we don't know how to go about their
care. If kasi po may mga shelter po ang DSWD for them if they really want to, and they have this recovery program for them po na ina-undergo if they are willing to accept. However po, ma'am, as of the moment po kasi ang requirement po ng DSWD is to have swab test prior po ng entering yung shelter houses nila. Ayun po. Then yung PGH po, as of the moment, they have this program po for the victims of abuses and other related cases po na may mental health facility po sila. Pero as of the moment, again po, nagkaka-problem lang po due to pandemic is yung physical interaction with the victim witnesses. But basically, I can give referral po if you really need because I have certain powers po in giving referrals po if you want.
Okay.
Oh, that's good to hear.
That's
good to hear that because at least we could help those children that were abused.
Yeah. Yes, and can I also ask a question from our speakers?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Actually, just a follow-up lang dito kay PDC Alice, no? Actually, the case that we are into, talagang as a mother and as a woman, talagang my heart is bleeding. Knowing that those who rape these children are their own father and grandfather. And yet, dinala na nila ito no sa mga na-enumerate kanina na sinabi ni Miss Lovely, no? They went to the barangay, they went to the police, but yet, hindi
materialize po.
Yeah, hindi man nag-materialize yun. At yung tatay, ay hindi rin nakakulong pa.
Sige po.
So, yun ang medyo nagiging problema namin. Like what you have said kanina,
Mhm.
the problem here is how to act on it. But then, I'm very happy sa sinabi mo kanina, Mr. Jaire, no?
Yes, ma'am.
That you can provide us the right offices where
Mhm.
we can bring this case.
Ma'am,
Oo.
sorry po. Ilang years na
Another
po ba
thing.
tong case na to, ma'am?
Yeah.
Kaya nga.
Another
I
thing.
think it's been a long time na
Mhm.
kasi yung mga anak niya,
Mhm.
the first one,
Mhm.
age 17, and then yung isa, I think it's
Mhm.
15, and then the other one is
5.
14, and the youngest
Mhm.
is 9.
Ayan.
9 years old.
Ma'am, sa Taguig
Oo.
po ito, no?
So, no, it's not in Taguig.
It's
But
in
within
a
NCR po?
Somewhere in the north.
Oh.
Somewhere in the north. It's not part of NCR. It so
Another-
happened lang na yung club namin ang nalapitan.
Okay.
Sige po.
Kaya medyo kami ngayon ang parang gustong tumulong sa kanila. Kasi kami ang,
Ma'am, may
ewan ko kung
social
paano
worker po
naman
ba within
lalapitan
their
kami.
place na pwedeng maggawa ng case study report so that mas easier ko pong magawa yung procedure?
Yung pa isa, Mr. Jaire.
Actually,
may I
oo.
butt in
Sige po.
muna, Doc Letty. Kasi baka makalimutan ko eh.
Opo.
Kasi we think parang may protector yung father. I don't know if the father or the grandfather.
Mhm.
So how do we go about it kung may protector nga? Paano namin mare-resolve yung mga
Siguro po, as Ma'am Lovely was saying a while ago, it's interdisciplinary process po kasi. So basically, it goes to the root na kailangan po talaga namin ng social case study report from the local social worker para ma-establish po yung case. Kasi once, parang may umuugong po.
Oo nga eh. I don't know kung saan siya.
Saan kaya yun?
Mute all ko siya. Yeah, in-mute ko.
Okay po. Para po ma-establish natin yung case, we need to have this social case study report from the social worker kung saan po yung location or residency ng client po para ma-establish po yung case. Kasi without it, we cannot move. Wala po kasing documentation. So, as I was saying a while ago, elements of the case po is very important para mas ma-establish po yung case. Then afterwards, upon the receipt po nung assessment na yun, we can go through the next step na po.
Actually, Mr. Jaire, we already have gathered some documents. Kasi ang medyo nakakasakit ng loob dito, lumapit na sila sa DSWD. Meron mga na yung mga bata, testimonies doon. But then, hindi pa rin nabigyan ng action. So, yun ang parang inaano ng guardian ng bata ngayon, no? Kasi nakatira yung,
Sige
lalo
po.
na yung pinakabata, nakatira yun sa tiyahin.
Sige po.
Kaya ang nagpuporso ng case ngayon para matulungan yung mga bata ay yung kanilang tiyahin. Ngayon, we have some documents with us. Kasama na yung physical examination ng bata. Okay. Nasa amin na. So, ang aming na lang is yung pag-action kung papaano nga yon na maitutuloy yung kasong ito. Kasi parang na-deprive sila of justice talaga.
For a certain period of time na po yan, no?
Yeah, kasi 4 na anak yan eh. So, actually, yung unang naging biktima niya, yung unang anak niya, may anak na eh. Na hindi na ngayon malaman kung anong tawag, kapatid, anak, sa tatay, tatay ko, kung ano yon. So, lover boy ko. So, iyon ang naging malaking sa amin challenge din sa inner wheel yan. Kung paano makakatulong ang inner wheel dito sa mga nabiktima ng ganitong pang-aabuso.
Sige po. If may resolution po si Ma'am Lovely, sige po muna.
Go lang. May lawyer po ba sila ngayon nakausap?
Wala. Wala silang lawyer. So, dumiretso na lang sila sa mga right offices kung saan, like for instance, yung DSWD. Dapat nga, sabi mo kanina, Miss Lovely, dapat hindi sila nakatira sa isang bahay.
Yes.
Ngayon, nasa isang bahay sila. Kasi sabi nga natin kung minsan, pag problema ng pamilya, mahirap manghimasok ang barangay o ibang tao. Kaya parang ganun ang nangyari.
Kaya
Na,
sana po sila yung nasa shelter eh.
Yes, yes.
oo, dapat nasa shelter. Pero hindi nga nagawa ng paraan kasi yung mga taong inaasahan nila na tamang puntahan ay hindi naman nagginanapan yung kanilang dapat na dapat ganapan, no? So, iyon ang nagiging namin. Kung papaano namin matutulungan tong pamilyang ito at para naman yung mga bata may save mo talaga. Kasi baka kunin na naman nung ama yung anak niya doon sa tiya na nag-aalaga sa kanya. So nakakaawa naman yung mga batang to na talagang na yung buhay nila. So yun ngayon ang siguro yun ang kaya hihingi kami ng tulong sa inyo, to save soul of these children.
Ang tanong ko pati dyan, since nandun nga sila sa tiyahin or sa father nga, paano namin mako-convince or pwede ba silang kunin para ilagay dyan sa sinasabi niyong shelter? So, how
Dapat
to
may
go about it?
representative po muna, diba?
Ha? Kasi,
dapat meron muna representative from the social worker that can actually parang enact on it and also parang validate kung bakit sila kukunin.
Very important po talaga, ma'am, yung case study report. Kasi from that, we can do the next step po talaga if ma-furnish po kami nun. Mas mapapabilis po.
Paano nga kung ang DSW din sa lugar nila ay hindi nga nakaka-act? So, ano yung second choice namin?
Saan po yung exact
Yes, ma'am.
Saan po yung exact
pwede po namin mapukpok.
Well, we just sabihin lang namin kasi malaking area naman, no? Somewhere in the north.
Sige po.
Somewhere in the north. Pero syempre, kung specifically, I think this is in Pampanga. Anyway, malaki naman yung Pampanga, no?
Yes.
So, ayun, yung lugar na yon.
Ito.
So, meron pa, do we have questions from the participants? More questions?
I'm sorry po. Actually, related doon. Very timely rin po because another talk, we're partnering with the Children's Rehabilitation Center and one lawyer who is into women and children. So, baka I can connecting nyo po doon sa lawyer na yun para for legal advice.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, so we are very thankful to have you, Mr. Jairi and Miss Lovely. The night is really lovely.
I'd
You
like
have
to say,
brightened up our minds, and of course, we can have a good sleep tonight because this is our problem, and we are really bothered about this. And so
may I ask one of the participants, he might like to say something.
Okay.
Rick from Texas, Dallas, would you like to say something about this human rights program of ours? Rick, are you still there? Rick Cruz? Nasa ano pa ba siya? Rick? Baka kasi nurse yan eh. Baka nasa pero nandito
na po.
siya. Oo. Baka nasa patient. Anyway, proceed, our Dr. Letty.
Okay, so we will now have the awarding of certificate. The citation will be read by our PDC advisor, Miss Alice Lucas.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Innerville Club of Taguig, District 383 presents the Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Jairi Reynor Vito for sharing his invaluable knowledge as keynote speaker during the Human Rights Day held virtually via Zoom app, given this 10th day of December 2020, signed by the Charter President Jocelyn M. Alpay, the Human Rights Committee Chairman.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat po.
CP Jocelyn?
Yes, so this is now for Miss Lovely. So please read again the citation, Miss Alice.
Okay, I think she does not have an audio. Okay, so We present this certificate of recognition to Ms. Lovely Ramos for sharing her invaluable knowledge as resource speaker during the Human Rights Day held virtually via Zoom app given this 10th day of December 2020, signed by the Charter President, Jocelyn M. Alpay, who is also the Human Rights Committee Chairman. Thank you very much. And we will just send this to you through email. Would that be
Thank you
fine?
so much.
Or you want it
Thank you
in
po.
paper
Thank you
form?
for inviting us po. And
Opo.
Yeah.
actually, we can just continue our communication
Yes.
further.
Yes, yes.
Steps regarding this one.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And we appreciate that very much. And now for the closing message to be given by Ms. Edita Jimenez, our club editor.
Mm.
In behalf of all the members and officers of the Inner Wheel Club of Taguig, with our president, Ms. Jocelyn Alpay, I would like to express my gratitude to all the wonderful people who attended this webinar, to our guest speakers for providing us invaluable knowledge of our basic human rights and how it was abused and exploited, and for educating us on how to avoid and fight for these different kinds of abuses. Once again, thank you everyone, and God bless us all po.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
maybe we can have a picture taking before we leave the chat room.
Yeah. Okay.
So can someone do the picture
Sige
taking?
po, I'll screenshot na lang.
Okay, please do. And send it to us.
Okay, 1, 2. Another one. Okay. Thank you again, everyone.
Okay.
And congratulations. Thank you for
Thank you.
Ma'am
Thank you
Lovely,
so much.
na-send ko po yung email ko sa chat box.
Thank
Baka
you.
hindi
Ha?
mo ako.
Sige, please send it to the
Ma'am,
chat.
yung regarding sa case, i-email nyo
Ah.
na lang po ko para at least I can also copy furnish po si Ma'am Lovely para at least we can go through.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And we
Thank you po.
Thank you.
so
Thank
happy,
you.
no?
Sige
to
po.
Thank
have
you so much.
Thank you po.
And-
Thank you po sa inyong lahat. Thank you po, NP. Thank you po.
Thank you to
Okay.
the
Take care po.
Thank you po sa lahat ng umaten. Press K, Doc Roan.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
IPP Bet,
Thank
Press
everyone
Nelly.
and good night.
Good night po.
Thank you very much to
Good
Dr.
night.
Villaluz.
Miss Lovely.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you, Pipi Malu.
God bless.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you
Thank
po,
you,
NP.
Pipi
Thank
Bet.
you.
Baby Dollars. Thank you, IPP classmate Bet. Thank you, Press Nelly. Doc Roan.
Okay.
Thank you
Celebrate
sa
na,
mga member ko.
celebrate na natin yung aking birthday
Happy
virtually.
birthday, PDC Ali.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday, BDC!
Thank you,
Thank you,
thank you.
Mami Letty.
Sabi ni, lasing po
Doc
kayo.
Ronan, Ricafort. Thank you po.
Kasi sabi ni Doc Nona Ricafort, magse-celebrate daw tayo after. Ewan ko kung nasa na siya, parang nawala na siya sa ano. Ha?
Thank you, Press BC. Thank you po.
Thank you sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Press
I hope
BC.
you had
Thank
a good
Thank you
time
po.
at saka na-enlighten tayo.
Thank you po.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Happy birthday,
Love you
Good
all.
night. Good night,
See you.
everyone.
Birthday again, Tita T.
Salamat. Salamat. Inuman na lang tayo.
Naman tayo.
PDC Alice.
Thank you, Press Vicky.
Naman tayo.
Okay. Good night.
I-TikTok na lang po.
TikTok. Ayan, mag-TikTok ka muna, kagawad. Entertain mo muna kami. Total, hindi pa ako nag-e-end ng fellowship na kaya tayo.
Not ready.
Not ready for the fellowship.
Eh, sayawan mo si PDC kasi birthday niya.
Ha?
Habang di pa siya nagano.
Sino?
Si Kagawad sasayawan ka niya ng TikTok kasi birthday
Yun na
mo.
nga di ba?
Gusto
Dapat
ko po live.
Di ba?
Personal.
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 Dapat hindi tina-turn down yung celebrant.
Yes.
I'm
Oo.
sure gutom na kayo.
Oo.
Hindi ko maibigay sa yung pagkain ko. May mga cake akong nakuha. So virtually lang tayo eh. So, good job Doc Letty Villaluz.
Oo.
That's a good master of ceremony.
Magaling.
Okay, congratulations to
Thank you,
Inner Club
thank
of Taguig.
you.
I hope this will not be the last time for you to have a webinar. Thank you and
Yeah.
God bless
Thank you.
everyone. Be safe. Bye. Good
Bye
night.
po.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.